Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
My name is Susan Norman, and I live in a very beautiful part of the world in Lake Tahoe, California. Very fortunate to have been able to find a career here with the U.S. Forest Service, which is our federal agency that manages public lands. And I've been retired from that job for about 7 years. During my career with the Forest Service, I did a lot of technical writing, water quality monitoring reports, and environmental assessments. So after I retired, that's when I started my journey in learning how to, the skills needed for creative writing, and eventually wrote my memoir.
Which is called Risk, A Life Saved by the River, which we're going to be talking about your memoir and your book. But I'm always fascinated going back to childhood because, were you interested in nature and spending time in the outdoors? Did you grow up in Lake Tahoe or on the coast somewhere? What were your early years like?
So my early years, actually, I lived in a very urban, large city environments because my father was a cartoonist and comedy writer, and the work that he could get were in places like Los Angeles, Cleveland, Ohio. Those are the two areas I primarily grew up around. And that wasn't really a good fit for him as far as where he wanted to be. So every weekend, he took us out onto rivers, sometimes backpacking and doing other stuff. But my interest in rivers came directly from his interest in that he was a pioneer in the evolution of whitewater boating as a recreational activity in the United States. And myself and my twin brother, we didn't really have a choice to accompany him on that lifelong journey, but that's where my love of being in nature and eventually becoming very much connected to rivers and paddle sport came from. And it wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't always an easy relationship. There was times when I was very scared and uncomfortable, but the whole experience definitely grabbed me in a way that when I made the transition from teenager into adulthood, I realized that was at a significant grounding place for me.
When you think back to that time, sort of being a teenager, I mean, it's so cool that you said about your dad being like a cartoonist and stuff and doing like the whitewater boating and paddling. And it's almost like quite alternative. It's not almost like your traditional 9 to 5 standard job. When you were thinking about what you would do in the future, what were your goals? What did you want to do? What were you inspired by? Did you want to become like well, I suppose back then there wouldn't have been professional like whitewater champions, would there?
No, and I never thought of whitewater paddling or competition as a career. I never had that goal, and it was very much an amateur sport, and it was always understood in my peer group because I did start competing when I was a teenager and fell into a group of young people in the sport that were inspired by a young man at the time named Jamie McEwen, who got a bronze medal in the 72 Olympics. And that's when this explosion of interest in competition sort of merged with this already very fast growing evolution of whitewater paddling as a recreational sport, because there was all these recreational paddling clubs throughout the United States who held these little kind of rinky-dink citizens races. But then this paddler that we all knew because we would see him at these citizens races became an Olympic champion, and everyone thought, all of us young people thought, well, that's super cool. Then the other motivation, besides it being super cool, and there was a group of cool kids doing it, was that I recognized that if I got into kayaking competition, which is that was the first mode of paddling competition that I started, I wouldn't be as scared when I was kayaking rivers recreationally. I could see that the people that did slalom whitewater had a very high skill set and can put their boat exactly where they wanted it, when they wanted it. And that was my ticket to like, okay, I can and actually learn to enjoy this sport when I become master of my own ship.
Yeah. Were you doing this with your twin brother? Were you both really into paddle sports at that time?
At that time, yes. And he was actually, uh, for the first part, until I got into racing, he was better than me because we were twins. So he had a physical advantage being a boy, and he wasn't as afraid of being upside down in his kayak. So he learned how to do an Eskimo roll faster than I did, which is the key to becoming a paddler, because then you don't, and enjoying it, because you don't spend so much time swimming outside of your craft. So for a couple of years, he was definitely able to do more and enjoying it more. And I was the kind of the weak link in our family. But it was when I started competing, then that switched.
See, I think this is really fascinating because I'm going to make an assumption now because is this in like is this in the 70s or the 80s that you were paddling?
Yes, I was in high school through the early 70s.
Got you.
And so that 72 was the first time whitewater kayaking was in the Olympics during, and I graduated from high school in 75.
Because I'm just thinking, and this is also a massive assumption, but I'm just going to assume that it was just a very male dominated sport and that there's probably wasn't a lot of, friends or girlfriends who are like, yeah, I want to do this kayaking. But the fact that you had your dad and your twin brother, it's almost like, especially with your brother, like that support network. And so actually did that give you the confidence to continue going on where almost like you didn't care that maybe you might have been the only girl doing it?
Yeah, that timing was very, precise in that you're right. There were no older female role models, hardly at all. But among these paddling clubs, there was a number of dads bringing their daughters about my age onto the river too. And we formed a tribe immediately. So we were supported by our fathers and our brothers, but I don't think I actually probably would have gotten into paddling the way I did if I didn't have some sisters that I met during those teenage years. And that definitely, we had the male support so we could get out on those rivers and be supported and be safe. But the other teenage girls that I paddled with, we were the ones that sort of pushed each other and also supported each other. So we could be there for each other when someone took a bad swim, and be around people who weren't going to make us feel bad about it and support us and like, oh yeah, that was really horrible. I'm sorry you went through that. But we could also kind of push each other. It's like, I think I'm going to go ahead and run that rapid instead of carrying it, around it. And if one of us did it, then there was a lot more likelihood that all of us would then do it.
Was your mum supportive at this time? I mean, I suppose, were you actively it's encouraged, or is it almost like, oh, girls shouldn't be doing this? Like, oh, do you have to go and paddle in the river? Can't you do some
Yeah.
sewing or something?
Well, my story is a little different in that my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 5, and she had a very aggressive form of it. So she was completely bedridden by the time I was 10. And she stopped living with our family around that time and went back to live with her parents. So I was raised by my dad for the most part, as a single father. The other girls I paddled with, they had moms, but the moms stayed at home. So, I don't think their mothers discouraged them from paddling, but they didn't really want to have any part of it.
That must have been so tough for you, the child. But or was it just? I suppose it's just what you know. Like, just that was just the normal that you knew.
Well, I knew it wasn't normal, and I was always aware of my mom's, and as I grew up, I became even more aware kind of how sad her situation was, and I spent plenty of time feeling sorry for myself not having a mother. I envied my friends who had moms to go home to after their paddling adventures, on the weekends. But, there's a lot of children who don't get to choose the environment they're brought up in. So you adapt for sure. And what I felt the strongest sense, I had to replace kind of that big hole in my family with a community. And that's what this paddling community really helped fill some of that hole I had in my life, not having a mom at home.
This must have been such a fascinating time to be whitewater paddling, because you would be one of the first women to be doing this. Is that right?
Well, I would say we were the first wave of women that really got into high level of paddling. Before that, there were maybe 5 women you could name that had, there were women that were on the 72 Olympic team, but they didn't perform well against the Europeans. The Europeans had a whitewater kayaking competition culture for a while. I mean, that's where whitewater kayaking was born in Europe as a recreational sport, and then a very strong, you know, national and world champion paddlers in Europe were well known throughout the country. That wasn't the case in the U.S. Like, we knew about our paddler that had become a bronze medalist, but the rest of America didn't know. They didn't weren't It wasn't attracting any attention. But in the generation that I started competing with, those women became world champions.
That's awesome.
I didn't, but I was paddling amongst the gods, which,
Yeah,
I got good. I didn't get to be the top, but I was, in the pod, so to
yeah.
speak.
Your new book is titled Risk. When did you start not being aware of risk, but being able to analyze and judge risk for yourself through the whitewater paddling?
It was definitely during my teenage years. I'd say I started making my own decisions and assessments during the last, probably when I was 17. But up until then, I do have to say I really left it largely up to my adult leaders, to tell me what I should do. If I could still be kind of pushed into doing, encouraged to do something. I don't recall really having a lot of desire to make my own judgments. I think the year I turned 17 and I was doing a fair bit of paddling, not with my dad, kind of in this environment where I was with other adults, but there was just kind of a little bit more agency I needed to take. But it's a pretty slow it's not like a sudden thing. It's kind of a graduated evolution of sort of understanding how, and then I'd have to, there definitely came a point where I was like, I am absolutely not listening to anybody else after I'd had a few experiences where usually a male had made a decision to do something that I could either see before I g followed them or had a close call after trying to follow them and realize I really am best off trusting my own judgment than anybody else's when you're doing a high risk sport.
The title of your book, Risk, A Life Saved by the River, was tell us more about a life saved by the river. What do you mean by that?
So, when I started writing this book and it was, I was writing the chapters in a group. I was in I found a writing coach because I knew if I was going to try and write stories about my life, that I didn't have the skill set really to do that, even though I was a very good technical writer. And in this group, I was with a large group of other women who were doing the same. So it was this amazing group of people that could help guide me through learning how to tell my story. And I didn't start out writing a book about that would have that subtitle. I was going to write a book that was, kind of like being the Forrest Gump of paddling, where I, you know, ended up in this environment where I was part of the evolution of this sport in our country in many aspects. And it was just based on the timing, really. And then, like I said, my dad's interest, but I lived through this amazing growth and evolution of the sport in our country. And that's what I thought I was going to be writing about, was sort of the history and growth of whitewater paddling seen through the eyes of a female whitewater pioneer. But as I told these stories, I was also raising my young nephew. And, I was already retired from the Forest Service, and I ended up in a situation where I had to take custody of my nephew at 4 years old because the lives of his birth parents, his father was my twin brother, unraveled. So when I was in this writing group writing this story about my coming of age story in the world of whitewater, they were also listening to me talk about all my frustrations and experiences trying to figure out how to be a parent to this young boy. And I had never wanted to be a parent. This wasn't something I had chosen for myself and never had any regrets, but it was something I had to step up and do. And they encouraged me to start writing about that experience of becoming a parent. At that time, Seth was only 5 when I started. I'd had him for about a year. And I started writing about that journey with him, including taking him on some river trips and realizing that the stories I was writing about my paddling experiences when I was young, and then my stories about trying to figure out how to parent this young boy who had, a number of issues, behavior issues related to his pretty tumultuous early years. There started being all these parallels about coming up to the edge of a precipice in life, whether it's at the top of a class 5 rapid or dealing with a meltdown at school and the principal calling you and saying you have to come get your kid, and not knowing how to navigate this very chaotic thing that's unfolding in front of you. And that subtitle, it often takes, you have to often, I've talked about this, or had this discussion with other authors, you actually never probably come up with your subtitle for a book until you've written the whole thing. Because the process of writing a book, the story evolves throughout that process. And it took me 6 years to write this book, and the form of it changed significantly throughout that whole time. And it was through the process of writing this half of my book, the chapters are about whitewater paddling and the life lessons I learned through that very significant part of my life. And the other half of the book is about my parenting journey and how I learned to use basically the lessons I learned on the river to cope with this very different challenge, and a bigger challenge, frankly, than I'd ever faced in my life before. There was a lot of parallels in kind of the way you approach challenge and how you manage it, and taking things step by step, developing skills, developing understanding, being able to accept failure over and over, but use that failure to come back and do better next time. So many different parallels between the two experiences. And then the last, the other part of it where that title came from, besides just all those parallels between just learning how to face challenge in general, was just that the other side of being involved in a river life is there are so many moments of peace, serenity, and connection that happens on rivers. And I've been pretty careful to, I don't want my nephew to have a lot of scary experiences on the river, maybe avoid some of the more scary experiences I had. But I wanted him to face challenge, but I also wanted him to experience the play and the connection. And so I took him on his first river trip when I was 5, or when he was 5, I mean. And that first year of parenting I was pretty much on the edge of a mental breakdown from all the challenges of that, and my feelings of not having the skills and the capability to be a parent. And when I went on that river trip, I went with a bunch of very close friends that used to be on my whitewater raft team, who had children of their own. And so I was with this strong support network. And during that 5 days on the river was the first time I remember feeling like I might be able to figure out how to do this, because everything got easy. I had this strong community, and I had this environment for this wild young boy to be in. And really, he just glommed on. He loved every bit of it. He loved riding on the raft, going through the rapids. He loved collecting sticks on the beach. He loved camping out under the stars. And I realized that was the trick my dad had figured out when he became a single parent when we were 10, is that our lives at home in the city were much more grim and more of a struggle. But when we got out on our adventures on the weekends, that's when all the magic happened.
You were 56 at this point, is that right?
Yes.
That's a major disruption to your life. Wow. How did you get through
Through it.
those? Yeah. Like, I just, like,
Yeah. And that's, the first thing is I have been able to use, like, when I've faced hard things that I can't see a path, which has been, like when I lost my mom, frankly, it's like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I just got to take it one day at a time. Um, and then, it's doing paddling things. What I learned very early on is to take every challenge in small steps, set small goals, and just try to get there. Because if you start looking out too far into the future, it becomes so overwhelming you don't want to get out of bed. So when I had to take custody of my nephew, it was not a choice I wanted to make. It wasn't something, it was something I just had to, all I could look at was like, well, what are the options? He's going to either go into foster care or I step up and become his guardian. And all I knew was that foster care for me was not an outcome that I could live with. So I didn't try to look into what it meant to be his guardian that hard. All I kept my focus on was I can't let him go into foster care. So I'm going to do these small steps, where I first, filed the court papers to become his legal guardian. At the same time, while I was trying to figure out, okay, where do I buy him clothes? How do I feed him? Rearrange my life so that I can take care of every single thing he needs throughout the day, take him off at daycare, be ready to leave work at a moment's notice when things blow up and I have to go pick him up and take him home. It was just day by day, just trying to get through each day. I also, fortunately, I do have a partner. Her name is Lisa, and we don't live in the same houses at that time, but she was there to be support, and she would come over. I would go over there and provide enough support so I wasn't completely alone. I was mostly on my own because I was living with him in a different location. And then when I retired from the Forest Service, I gave my partner an ultimatum and I said, I either have to move in with you with Seth and we do this together, or we have to not continue this relationship because I don't have the ability to maintain a long-term relationship and try to continue being a parent of this human being that has an awful lot of needs. We both took the same approach of, well, let's try it for a year and see how it turns out. So it was a big move for me. I moved over to the town of Truckee, which is on the north end of Lake Tahoe. My house is on the south end of Lake Tahoe. Again, we made it through that year. She decided we could keep going. We spent about 5 years living together over in her house on that side of the lake. And then when he was middle school age, I decided to move back over here. We're still married. We're still together, but we've just went back to living in separate houses because he was old enough to be able to do that by then.
How I can't even ask because I'm going to make me laugh. Uh,
Yeah.
I haven't been around teenage boys for I don't know how long, but how were the teenage years for you? Was he still, were you still going on river trips? Had you really sort of bonded at this point? Was there still what's the word I'm trying to say? Like, yeah, the teenage years, like,
I'm in it right now because he's 15.
okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there was all the challenges of the elementary school kid, a lot of emotional dysregulation, a lot of tantrums. He kind of lives with big emotions, but along with his big anger and frustration, he also has big joy. So, it's been a course of real challenge for me to try to not get over triggered when he's in his big anger moments. And we've both been to counselors and learned a lot of skills about how to try to de-escalate situations. And we still actively practice that. The difference is now is he is a 6-foot, 15-year-old boy. He had a major growth spurt about 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, I'm not parenting a little boy anymore. I'm interacting with a man child who has a deep voice and a big presence. So our interactions, he has, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, it's called oppositional defiance disorder.
No.
Yeah. So he's a little bit on the spectrum of that, which means he doesn't like being told what to do and is not one of those kids that is easy to direct. So anything he perceives as an order is going to be met with resistance. There has to be a lot more negotiation.
So if you're out on the river doing an adventure, there are certain times when you need to give orders for safety, and
Yes.
there's not time to negotiate. It's like, this is not a conversation. This is, you need to do this
Yeah.
because of the risk involved. How would you manage those situations?
Well, fortunately, I do have to say that I mean, that's why, I mean, I think sometimes it's always been easier on the river is because I have a very high skill level. He mostly, I think, understood that based on how the other people in our party interact with me. So he's always deferred to me on the river. And I also got support from the other people. It's like, yes, you have to have your life jacket all the way clipped up and zipped. You can't shortcut, and so he was pretty easy to control on the whitewater and for safety because he knew I was an expert and he knew that the other people on the trip, that was just, there was just no negotiation. There was never any fuzzy boundaries because that's the time when children have trouble is when the boundary line moves. And on the river, that just isn't allowed to happen. The boundaries are always pretty solid. I mean, they're very solid, especially in the environments that I've put ourselves in. Now that he's older, and he has developed some pretty good skills himself. We do get into debates about it, but I go ahead and let him make mistakes because a lot of times, the kinds of rivers we're on, that's actually part of the experience. Is if he says, I'll let him take the boat by himself, even like a raft with oars. I'll say, I'll let you just do this. I'll talk to him about how he should run the rapid. He may have a different opinion. And I just say, well, let's go ahead and try it your way. And then I'll let him learn by himself if he ends up, and of course, I'm not going to put him on a rapid where I think he's going to die or ruin our equipment. But if I can assess that, whatever mistakes he makes, he'll probably get through in one piece, I'll just let him go ahead and make the mistakes and learn himself.
I love that. What would be the advice around adventuring with children?
Yeah, go as soon as you can, and just start doing it because it can seem so overwhelming. But, my parents started taking my brother and I on river trips when we were 2.5. They started taking us on overnight canoe trips in the Ozarks. And I actually have fuzzy memories of those times. Most children don't have a lot of memories of their really, really early years, but I have a few. And I know that we've capsized sometimes and that my brother and I were floating down the river when we were 3 years old, waiting for some adult to pluck us out. My parents took risk, but it was it was calculated risk. They were with a strong group of people with skills. And I believe that is the power of outdoor adventure sports is being able to set up situations where you can challenge yourself and you're going to get spanked sometimes and you're going to be afraid. But the growth that occurs when you have been able to overcome those challenges and figure out how to survive them is so powerful. Because then when you're facing other challenges in life that outside of the river or your adventure sport, they don't seem nearly as daunting. From your experience that you can face things that are hard and figure out how to survive them. But the key is to be sure and develop a lot of skills yourself and then surround yourself with a group of people that also has good judgment and a lot of skills. Because there are a lot of dangers on river trips and other kinds of adventure sports you do in the outdoors, but they can be managed and you don't have to put yourself outside of you choose how far outside your comfort zone you go, and you choose the level of risk. And with children, like I've never, whitewater boating, the difficulty scale goes from class 0 to class 5. Most of the time, my son and I stay on class 3 or below. And then when we do class 4, I make sure that he is in a very safe position in that, in a boat with someone who's guiding it that knows what they're doing. And we have all the appropriate safety. And there's a high chance we're going to survive our challenge.
One of the things that can happen while adventuring is that element of fear, and it's managing fear. And I
Hmm.
suppose there's two parallels here. Is one is like, it's the fear fear can obviously be a good thing while you're on the water and make sure that you're prepared, you're organized, you know what you're doing, etc. You're ready to tackle that challenge. But then raising your child now is, I suppose, the fear of being a parent. And I know I get, when I look after my niece and nephew, sometimes it's like, oh God, what if something happens? You can get a little bit
Yeah.
panicky. And I suppose, what have you learned from doing your whitewater rafting, learning to manage your fears, to control your emotions, to apply that to parenting? Are there any tips or tricks or anything that's worked well for you?
Again, it's just learning that fear is actually a very healthy emotion. And I'm way more skeptical of people who don't feel fear. Like, those aren't really the people I want to be around if I'm taking on a challenge in my paddling. I want to be around people who are gonna feel the fear and are gonna make good choices because of it. And I have coached a lot of kids in paddling as well, and the phenomenon I've seen in teenagers, especially with boys, is when they start developing all their physical strength and skills and they get really good at something, I do see this, that it's true in every adventure sport. You know, young men love to really, that are really skilled and good, they really push themselves. And I have to say, as a mother, I'm very relieved to see that my son so far has not shown that inclination. He likes adventure, he likes to have fun, but he doesn't seem to feel a need to take super high risk. He doesn't need that adrenaline high or endorphin high that comes with that. Hopefully that won't change. But what I have made sure with him, and like I said for myself, again, facing fear is about gaining the best understanding you can about the challenge you're facing, and then getting the skills to address that challenge. So with Seth, what I knew from very early on, one of the things that I didn't do when I was young is I never became a good swimmer. And that was a really big handicap for me as a whitewater paddler, because even though I became very skilled and didn't come out of my kayak very much, when I did, it was a pretty awful experience. And then I got into whitewater raft racing with this group of women that I competed with for many years. And we were competing on class 5 whitewater. And again, it's like you can't Eskimo roll a raft. So if we flipped, I had to develop skills to make sure I wasn't going to take, a horrendous swim or actually drown. I learned how to hang on to the raft, and my friends rigged lines around the raft. So if we took a big back ender in a big rapid, I grabbed onto a line and made sure I held on and could keep myself from getting sucked in the water. But I always knew that not having strong swimming skills was a handicap that I frankly still have. So I started Seth swimming right away, and that he has a great love for being in the water. And when he was about 7 and 8 and I was introducing him to kayaking, and he was starting to do it. And he was, he was just doing it because I asked him. He was willing to try it out, but it was, scary. But at the same time, a friend of mine introduced him to riverboarding. And riverboarding is like ocean boogie boarding. You go down the river with a big foam board that has handles on it and boogie board fins, and you're essentially swimming the river. And right away, he gravitated to that. And we were on pretty easy river close to where we live, class 1 or 2 on the difficulty scale. And because I got him into swimming really young in the pool and doing lessons and playing in Lake Tahoe and being on the water, and he started using this riverboard, and he had a very strong kick, and he innately knew how to read the water even at age 8 because of the amount of time we'd spent on the river. He understood what an eddy was. He understood currents. He knew how to ferry. He knew how to move things. And he developed this comfort with the river at a level that I frankly never have. Like, he can be outside of his boat and feel comfortable swimming through a rapid and getting himself out. So his level of fear, like my biggest fear is being ejected out of my boat and being out in the water just in my life jacket. He's not afraid of that because he knows how to handle it, and he's strong enough and has the swimming skills to rescue himself.
I love that. You've just passed on so many skills, so many skills, but also knowledge, and also an area maybe where you were weak, and you thought, actually, I'm not going to let that impact on his life by getting him those swimming lessons. Like, what an incredibly powerful memoir to write, Risk, a life saved by the river. Massive congratulations on the book. You do have a website and a blog. Where you would like to share that so people can connect with you and find more information out about you?
Yes, my website is susannormanauthor.com. There is another Sue Norman author that may come up, but if you put adventure memoir at the end of that, then my name will for sure come up. The book is actually already available for pre-order on Amazon, and I will be at some point looking to see if I can get international rights and get my book available overseas, because I have so many connections with the international paddling community. I would like to try to make it available in Europe for sure.
Susan, thank you so much for coming on Talk Our Podcast to share your story. And I'd love for you to have the final words of advice, maybe focused in, I suppose, on risk and saying yes to risk. And, what advice would you have for other women who are maybe coming to a crossroads in their life and they've got to make a decision? Words of advice for having to make those tough decisions. What would you like to say apart from just do it?
Every challenge can feel so insurmountable until you break it into small steps. And that's just always been the key for me, is to just bite off what I feel I can chew in that hour or that day or that week and do that and then keep moving forward. I encourage everyone to look for ways to introduce risk into their life in a way that's healthy. I call it good risk, because good risk will help you manage bad risk. And we have a term here, for children that grew up in situations like myself because of my mom's illness, and my nephew because of problems with his birth parents related to addiction and mental health. We would be considered at-risk children that grow up in an environment where they don't feel safe or secure. There's no stability. We grow up with in an environment that we're basically walking a tightrope, because the emotional development that occurs in children that grow up in that kind of situation, it's very easy to fall into addiction or develop mental health problems, things that will end up affecting you being able to become a functioning adult in society. But I think the key to be able to manage that is finding good risk that helps you develop the skills to overcome challenges, whether it's managing interactions with your peers, feeling uncomfortable in the environment you're in, find risk and find risk in the outdoors, whether it's just going on a challenging hike, a challenging run, go on a whitewater rafting adventure in a safe, supported environment. But if you can find these fun, supportive ways in community to take on what I call good risk and connect with the outdoors and nature, I really believe it provides this incredible platform and foundation of resiliency that then can help you overcome challenges that come flying out of you out of nowhere because of a physical illness or a mental illness within your family. You're just better equipped to be able to handle those situations.
Absolutely. Find the good risk. Susan, thank you so much for writing your incredible book, Risk, A Life Saved by the River. Thank you so much for sharing your story on the Tough Girl podcast, and best of luck with all your future adventures and challenges.
Thank you very much.
Hey folks, how you doing? So I was just having a thought the other day. I was just thinking, because the Tough Girl podcast content is evergreen. So what that means is all of the episodes that I've been releasing since the 4th of August 2015 are still live now. And so 10 years later, you could be listening to episodes that I released in 2015. And it just made me think, like, how weird would it be in like 2035 if you're listening to this episode? So my little challenge to you, if you are listening to this episode in 2030 or 2035, can you just like take a screenshot and tag me on Instagram, if Instagram and Facebook are still around? Like, I'm sure things sort of changed over the next sort of decade, but my handle is at Tough Girl Challenges. So I like to think of these like endings, or how I think of the endings when I have like a little catch up and a little chat with you all, is basically almost like this mini timestamp of what I was doing or what's going on at that point in time. So it's now October 2025. Obviously, like August has been pretty busy, pretty full on with finishing the GR10, getting a film produced and submitted to the Kendall Mountain Film Festival. Haven't heard back from them yet. Meant to hear back on the 1st of October. So I'm not quite sure if the film has made it in or not. I really hope it does. The film is called 10. Obviously, a lot of connections with the word 10, hiking the GR10, 10 years of the Tough Girl podcast, etc. It was a 10 out of 10 hike. So I'll keep you updated on that. Probably best to follow along on social media, on Facebook or Instagram. That's where it will be announced. But I will be going to the Kendall Mountain Film Festival anyway, because I'll be there to support other women and their films and just to connect and just have a bit of fun as well. Like, just head up to the Lake District, hang out with Gemma and Ellen, who we're going together. And there's going to be loads of other like badass women that are going there as well. Like Tori, he's been on the Tough Girl podcast before, and Joe, who's been on the Tough Girl podcast, are going to be heading up as well with they're doing a talk. Rennie McGregor is going to Rennie McGregor is going to be up there as well, giving a talk as well with her latest book. So there's going to be just lots of like badass women up there. And so it's always nice to connect with people face to face. So if you are going to be heading up to Kendall Mountain Film Festival, please do give me a shout. It'd be awesome to see you. I'm going to try and get some stickers, more stickers printed out. You know, tough times don't last, but tough girls do. So if you see me, come up. Please do come up and say hi. I'm probably going to be wearing a lot of pink. I'll probably have my pink hoodie on, or maybe another pink tough girl top. But yeah, just please do come and say hi, come and have a photo taken. It would be amazing to chat even. And also, I just want to hear more about your lives, like your adventures, your challenges, what you're working on, etc. So I'm having a bit of downtime at the moment. I recently just did a second FKT, which was on the Wirral Circular Trail, which was really good fun. So basically, I'd finished the GR10. I was feeling really fit and really strong. And obviously, I've been hiking on average about 30k in the mountains with a 14 kilogram pack. And I thought, oh, okay, this is the time to test my fitness. Like, how does my fitness translate to how long is it? A 59 kilometer, about 36 mile walk on flat ground, a circular loop, very, very flat, like not going higher than like I think the total elevation gain was something like 435 meters. So how would my fitness translate? And so I managed to maintain a pace of about 6 kilometers per hour for about 9 hours, 20 minutes to complete the circuit. And the reason I got an FKT is because no woman had recorded herself doing the loop. And I'm sure there are many women out there who can do a much better time. And to be honest, I actively encourage you to go out and break my record, break the FKT. But I did feel as though it was important for there to be a women's record in that space. If you want to learn more about FKTs, fastest known times, please go check out the website, fastestknowntime.com. All of the information is in there on how you can set your own FKT. Check out the trails which are close to you. See if there is a women's record. If there isn't, go out and get the record. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. You know, it took me 9.5 hours. Doesn't matter, because hopefully what that does is it inspires, you know, the next woman to think, well, hold on, if Sarah can do it in 9.5, I think I can do it in 6. I think I can do it in 5. Like, oh my goodness, absolutely, that is what I want. It's just to, you know, to get more women's records and to get more women out there and to encourage more women, because some women don't feel confident enough to be sort of the first one doing something, which I get. Whereas actually, if you feel comfortable and confident about being the first, you're laying a trail, you're paving a route for other women to follow behind you, where it's not like a big deal anymore. It's just like, oh, okay, there's a women's record. I think I'll have a go. And by the way, it's not all about records. It's just another sort of indicator that women aren't forgotten in history and that they are recognized of achieving things and going out and doing things. So that was pretty fun. So, but next couple of months, I'm just having a bit of downtime, just recovering, doing lots of yoga, doing lots of stretching, getting back into my strength and conditioning. I'm working on my gut health as well. I'm going to be seeing Dr. Kathy Gregg in the middle of October. I'm going to be having something called bioresonance done, which is really cool. And really sort of focusing on my gut health. But I'll share more about that later. If you want to keep updated with what I am up to, different ventures and challenges, even though there's not many coming in the next couple coming months, then please follow along on Instagram at Tough Girl Challenges. Tough Girl Challenges, and the website is toughgirlchallenges.com. I do want to say a massive shout out to a new patron, the amazing Anne Hansen. Thank you so much for signing up as an annual patron. To be honest, when your notification came through, it was just, honestly, it was a relief. I was like, amazing, another patron. Like the income from patrons that comes in every month is a game changer. It really does allow me to continue producing the Tough Girl podcast. You know, there are, as you well know, there are costs involved in running a website, in hosting on Dropbox, and even just like keeping the raw audio files that I collect and the audio footage, you know, keeping them in Dropbox, etc. I'm now at like 4 tregabytes, I think, 4 TB. I think I'm up to in storage, and that's already getting full, so I need to increase storage and all of that good stuff. So actually having the regular financial support really does make a difference. So if you're interested in supporting the work that I do, then, you know, there's loads of things that you can do. You can tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. You can follow along on social media. You can share any of the Tough Girl podcast posts on social media. You can sign up as a patron by visiting Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. There's lots of different options. You can become a monthly member. You can become like an annual member. So you can pay like, you know, $24, $54 a year, £2, £4 a month, £8 a month, £10 a month. You know, think of it as buying me a coffee each month. Even though I don't drink coffee, think of it being buying me a hot chocolate every month. You know, especially if you're listening on a regular basis. It's just a way of, to be honest, just paying it forward. So, and honestly, you might think, it's not going to make a difference if I subscribe at $2 or £2 or £5 or $5 a month. It does make a difference. Like literally, having 130 odd people subscribing, $2 to $5, $10, etc., does make a massive difference. I cannot thank you enough for your contribution and for your support. So to Anne, thank you so much. You're honestly getting that email through really boosted me, because like sometimes I do have a few like down moments where I'm like, what am I doing? Is anyone listening? And so when I get like a review left, or someone shares a post, or I get a nice email or a nice message saying, Sarah, because of you, I went out and did this, or I listened to this episode, and because of hearing one of the incredible women speak and share their story, it's given me the courage to to try a new challenge, to go rock climbing, to go walking, to sign up for a 5K, to start the 5K to couch, to go to a park run, to sign up for an Ironman, to decide to book that trip, to go and visit that city, to leave that job, to leave that relationship, whatever it may be. So I hope it just gives you the courage and the confidence to take on your next adventure challenge. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I will speak to you soon.